So what we're going to talk about today is a concept called emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence is a concept that runs very deep. And just like academic intelligence, you can always get smarter. Well, emotional intelligence is the same thing. You can always get smarter. But what it basically means is to be aware of what you're feeling, to understand how your thinking and your behavior affects your emotional state, to be able to adjust your thinking and behavior to create the type of emotional state that you want, and also being able to read other people and understanding how we all affect each other, because we're doing it all the time. Now, it's a concept that runs very deep, but it basically all boils down to awareness. Emotional intelligence is all about awareness, and we can always become more aware, meaning we can always become more emotionally intelligent. And the more aware we become, the less stress we have, the more joy we experience, and the more productivity and success we have in our lives. Now, one of the most important concepts to grasp is that emotions are very real biochemicals produced by the brain. They're very real, meaning they're scientifically measurable, palpable substances that float around in our body anytime we're under any sort of stress at all. Now, there's a couple reasons why it's very important to understand the biochemical nature of emotions. The first reason is because if you know what you're feeling and why you're feeling it, you're going to be able to address that particular issue, that particular feeling, with a much higher degree of accuracy and effectiveness. For example, let's say I'm having a neck problem, and I go to the orthopedic doctor, and I say, "Doc, I'm hurting." Okay, but I don't tell him where I'm hurting or why I'm hurting. Hey, how long is it going to take him to get to my neck? Okay, it's probably going to take him a while. And because I haven't told him where it hurts the most, well, I may now have problems in my back and in my hip and maybe even in my legs because I haven't dealt with the core issue. And if I tell him, well, the problem's in my back, okay, if that's where I think it is, but it really started in my neck, and maybe if he's not a very good doctor and he doesn't realize that it started in my neck, well, he can treat my back all that he wants to, but it's not really going to address the core issue. And emotions sort of work in the same way. When we don't address the core issue, meaning when we don't address where it hurts the most, it can lead to all sorts of other problems that don't seem to be related, but actually they are. Now, in the case with an orthopedic problem, such as a neck problem, it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that that can lead to all sorts of other issues, okay, in the back and in the hip and so on and so forth. But when it comes to emotions, it's very, very, very difficult to see just how much one emotional issue can lead into another and the effect that it has. It's very difficult to see. And the second reason why it's important to understand the biochemical nature of emotions is because emotions attract each other like a magnet. Negative emotions attract negative emotions, and positive emotions attract positive emotions. So let's imagine you're looking at a huge to-do list like this. Okay, how do you feel looking at that list? Okay, most people, if I stop and ask them this question, they'll say, well, I feel overwhelmed. Or some people say, I'm distressed. Okay, but the reality is, on a day-to-day basis, most people are walking around overwhelmed and stressed, and they're not really aware of it. And what's happening is they're constantly in the habit of multitasking, of bouncing around that list, trying to get things done, and kind of treading wheels a lot of times because they're walking around overwhelmed and stressed so much of the time. The idea is that because we're not aware that we're overwhelmed, is essentially leading to all of those other stressors. Now, when you learn to become more aware of your emotions, in other words, to become more emotionally intelligent, and you learn to pick up on when you're feeling overwhelmed, and you learn to, in a very real way, cover up the rest of that list, you are, in effect, processing your emotions in that moment. Okay, the feeling that you get when you get something off your chest, that's very real. And in a very real way, what happens is your emotions have been processed. And it's not only what happens in that moment, but by doing that, you are preventing a host of other emotions from coming into play simply by the fact that you're cutting it off and you're not letting it attract other things and bring other emotions and other stressors into the works. Now, the reality is a lot of other emotions are going to come into play whether we like it or not. But I'd like to talk about being overwhelmed first because I think it's sort of a background emotion that's almost always there for a lot of people. And a lot of times emotions really do come in combination. So you'll hear people say, I was overwhelmed with frustration. I was overwhelmed with confusion. I was overwhelmed with anger, and so on and so forth. The idea is that if you learn to slow yourself down in any given moment, it's going to make a tremendous difference in your ability to resolve whatever issue you have going on in that moment. Daniel Goleman, author of Emotional Intelligence, states that the cornerstone of emotional intelligence is being aware of what you're feeling the moment it arises. I like to think of it as being aware of what biochemicals are hitting your body the moment they hit your body. And the reason that is because how you respond to that initial hit, so to speak, dictates the intensity of the emotion you're going to experience. For example, let's say I'm driving home and I get stuck in traffic, and let's say I've got a really important dinner meeting to go to. Okay, what am I likely to feel? Okay, most likely frustration or some anger. Well, if I am not aware that I am frustrated or angry, and I start immediately saying, "Oh my God, I'm so sick of this. Why don't people in the city just learn how to drive?" Okay, so I start automatically reacting that way. I am literally feeding myself more emotion. Okay, I literally have more biochemicals floating around in my body. If you could put whatever I'm feeling into a needle, okay, it's as if I'm getting myself high in every millisecond that I react that way. And as I do that, my ability to think clearly is gone. And at this point, I'm going to make very poor decisions. So maybe I'm going to weave in and out of traffic and get into an accident. Maybe I'm going to flip somebody off and get into a road rage. Okay, let's say I'm lucky enough to get to the meeting. What's my frame of mind going to look like? How am I going to present myself? Maybe I'm now going to blow an important business deal because I'm still carrying over stress from being in traffic. Now, this is somewhat of an extreme example, but it's very easy to not notice the ripple effect the emotions can have in our lives. Now, on the flip side, let's say I am aware of that initial hit of frustration. I feel that biochemical rush, but instead of automatic reacting, I pause, okay, and I take some deep breaths. When I'm doing that, I'm essentially keeping those biochemicals in check. Now, it's not that I'm not frustrated, but the fact is I'm not making the situation worse than it is. And by doing that, I'm maintaining my ability to think clearly and to make better decisions. So, for example, maybe I'll take a deep breath and calm myself down. Maybe I'll turn on some relaxing music, or maybe I'll call ahead and explain the situation. And by doing any one of these things, I'm essentially preventing a host of other emotions from coming into play. And by putting a stop to that thought process that makes things much worse than it is, I'm essentially stopping that biochemical process that's making the emotion much more intense than it needs to be. Now, in a very real way, we all have two quote-unquote voices in our head. I'm going to hold this up really close so you can get a really good picture of it.